This is in memory of my mom, who did not raise a quitter. Growing up in the 80s, I was this quirky combination of being both gifted and at risk. My parents were divorced, and my mom and I lived in the second floor apartment of an old Victorian house at 348 East Main Street in Dallastown. She worked 2 jobs, so I was a latchkey kid from about the age of 7, and I could be counted on to keep my shit together because I knew that my mom was depending on me. But I think she thought that I was brighter than I really was, because she was constantly sort of like feeling for the boundaries of my adulting capabilities. And I think she found them when she got me my first York Dispatch paper route. The idea was that I could earn money and learn responsibility, but I was 9, which might have been illegal and was definitely against the company policy that you had to be 12. So I felt constantly guilty as I was delivering my papers because I knew that I was breaking rules, but mostly I was just scared. Not of like a rational fear that maybe a kidnapper would get me as I'm walking the streets in the mornings and the evenings alone. I feared this hair lady. She lived on Maple Street, like up on this hill, and there were tiers of steps to get to her front porch, and she would stand up there and brush her hair, like in her nightgown, and her hair was the longest that I had ever seen on anybody other than Crystal Gale on TV, and it was like, I was certain she was a witch. I was petrified. In the evenings, I was scared of the angry guy. So this guy also lived on Maple in a duplex on the other side of the street, and he would just scream random things at me as I approached, like, "Hey, paper girl, you look like a boy." Like, and which is like an odd preoccupation for someone who's 50. And I'm 9, but so I was too young to really formulate the words to tell him what I would tell him now. But at the time, I just my instinct was to kind of run. But these papers were super heavy, like especially on Sunday, and I had 2 bags, and I would kind of crisscross them over my chest, so it was like I had one bag choking me from this side and then another bag choking me from this side, so basically just like this suffocating androgynous weeble, and I can't. So I told my mom that I wanted to quit, and she was like, "Chrisser, I ain't raising you to be a quitter." And I could even just tell from the look in her eyes that something unusual was about to happen again. Because, my mom was only 25 at this point, and she wasn't really fettered by the conventional boundaries that really would stop other parents. So she kept me up late that night, and under cover of darkness, drove us to the parking lot at D&K Surplus Grocery. And then we drove back up Route 74 with his stolen shopping cart hanging out the trunk of the car. So now I'm doing my illegal paper route with a stolen shopping cart that, just like everything else you buy or even apparently steal from D&K, is completely defective. It's got this It's got this wobbling wheel that just won't quit, and it's so loud, and I was so embarrassed that I could not I couldn't stand it by myself. So thankfully my friend Bridget lived in the first floor apartment below us, and she was a year younger than I was, so she would do whatever I told her to do, including helping me with this paper route when I could tell she really wanted no part of this. So one morning, it was Sunday morning at 5 a.m., I tapped on her window to wake her, and she came out, and neither of us was into this, and The thing about my personality, I think, is that I really do, I try and try. And then when a situation reaches like a certain point of absurdity, I am just done. And I can respond in like some pretty epic ways. In this case, I feel like it falls short of the legal definition of arson. Bridget, operating on my instructions, went to her apartment and brought me the lighter that her brother earlier in the week had used to show me how to make an Aquanet torch, you know? And I dragged the papers into the breezeway between our apartment building and the elderly next door neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Scott. For those of you who haven't seen 43 editions of the York Sunday News, like set ablaze, it was not discreet. Like whole sheets of these coupons were like soaring through the air, like flaming ash birds, and like landing all over the backyard and people's like garage roofs and stuff. And I was satisfied, so we went back inside to get some more sleep, but I could have no peace because these people kept calling to complain, like, we want our coupons. and you know, I just let the machine get it. But my mom was overhearing all of this, and she was like, Chris, I don't understand why they'd be calling if they didn't, you know, like if you got, you know, delivered the newspapers. And I just kind of looked at her and said, oh, Mom, like, who am I to say why people do the crazy things they do in this world? And that might have worked if I hadn't caught the side of our apartment building on fire. Mr. and Mrs. Scott called our landlord because they saw these flames outside their window and they were concerned. Then my mom actually explained to me that our landlord was the fire chief of Dallastown. So I have no idea why he didn't evict us, but I feel like I won the long game on this one because about 15 years after torching my papers, I started my career as a reporter at the York Dispatch, and that might not have happened without free early access to newspapers.